I think the message is quite clear. We want you, every National School of Character, to mentor another school. Out there are loads of schools hungry, desirous of having what you have. Help them. Today, my colleagues, the coordinators from New York and Pennsylvania, join me in asking you to become a powerful force in developing more schools of character across our nation. Here we are, the three of us, in our First Communion outfits. And all three of us are also national evaluators. And we had observed in our site visits that there were some schools that were dealing with the so-called vulnerable populations. That's kids living in poverty, very frequently minority, experiencing language barriers, marginalized in every way. And these National Schools of Character were doing a commendable job of creating a culture of caring in their school where the kids thrived. And then we thought, wouldn't it be great if they could share their secrets with other schools with similar demographics? And this was the genesis of our Ascent project, which we'll tell you about. Actually, we are going to tell you more about what we learned from the project rather than give you a long description of it, because I think it would be of greater use to you if you are a National School of Character intending to mentor another school, or perhaps you are a state coordinator who is thinking about arranging for a cohort of partner schools. So briefly, we'll look at what steps we took initially. We joined together, applied for a grant, and implemented a one-year coaching project in which we used 9 National Schools of Character as our mentors, and NJASCCD was our sponsor. Now, as you know, every grant requires a certain amount of paperwork, administrative detail, documentation, distribution of funds. For that, we turned to Trustee Bill Trustheim, the president of NJASCCD. The Board of Trustees agreed that the Alliance would sponsor our project. Now, we called our project the Ascent Project, which is an acronym for the Alliance of Schools of Character for Enrichment, Networking, and Transformation. And as you can see, both the name and the concept represents precisely what we wanted to achieve during this one year. To raise the aspirations of the students and the schools so that these schools teaching vulnerable populations were well on their way to becoming National Schools of Character. Because New Jersey had the greatest number of National Schools of Character, 10 schools in our entire project represented New Jersey, 5 as mentors and 5 as mentees. And if we look at this photo here, the gals on the right are from Terrence Riley School Number 7, a National School of Character, and they coached the team on the left from Albert Einstein Academy School Number 29. Both schools were in Elizabeth. And what is interesting is that Albert Einstein, that had applied before and never could go beyond an emerging school, became a New Jersey School of Character, a National School of Character at the end of the year. And they also presented at our Alliances conference and at the nationalcharacter.org forum. If the urban schools were the domain of New Jersey, then the suburban schools were the province of New York. And Phil found two districts in Long Island, Uniondale and Lawrence, that had a sizable number of students who would be considered part of the vulnerable population. And right next to Phil is Sheila Jefferson Isaac, an outstanding administrator who has mentored many schools because Uniondale, a heavily minority district, now has every one of its schools as a National School of Character. Pennsylvania had only 2 schools in the project, but what is interesting is that they were both Catholic schools in inner city Philadelphia that had a 99% or above minority population. And we purposely chose these schools to add another quality to the mix. The Big 7. Now that we have given you some background on our project, we would like to share with you 7 tips for successful mentoring based on our own experience. Tip number 1, choose a school with similar demographics and grade levels. From our experience, the schools that became New Jersey Schools of Character and National Schools of Character the first year were those that were in the same district as the mentor school. So geographically helps too if the schools are close to one another. So if you want to make the easiest choice, take a school that's in the same district. Now, Phil's comments on the demographics of the New York schools corroborates precisely what we said in our first tip. Schools Helping Schools was the focus of the Mentor-Mentee Relationship Initiative in New York State. In New York, the 2 participating districts were Uniondale and Lawrence, both of which served vulnerable populations, and both were neighbors on Long Island. Their close proximity made collaboration very easy. Tip number 2 is to plan ahead. Granted, you do not want a mentoring situation to become overloaded with bureaucracy or forms, but you do need a timeline. When are you going to meet? What are you going to achieve? You need a structure, some kind of documentation indicating what is done in a site visit or a Zoom visit, and an overall end goal. And if we look at this picture, on the left are the team members from Joseph Brensinger in Jersey City, and the right from School 28 in Elizabeth. And what is interesting here is that the bond between the 2 schools was so close that even though the grant was over, the 2 teams continued to meet. And when Brensinger applied for a New Jersey School of Character, they turned to School 28 for guidance and also to me. And remarkably, they became a New Jersey School of Character in 2020. Tip number 3 is work as a team. We generally recommend teams of 3 from each school, with one of those members being an administrator. Frankly, the teachers usually do all of the work, but the administrator has clout, and you really need support for the mentoring program, perhaps money for subs, release time, fees, or maybe to put a program into effect. And of the 5 mentees that we had in New Jersey, 4 of them became New Jersey Schools of Character. And the only one that didn't, and it did win a promising practice, had nothing to do with its ability or its background. It was simply that the principal retired and there wasn't somebody to take her place. Phil Fusco's advice in these two quotes dovetails exactly with our last tip. And in the first quote, he says, having the support of administrators served to highlight the value of assent and then making buy-in very easy. And his second observation is about SMART goals. And SMART goals are goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And to a large degree, we made them as an outgrowth of taking the 11 principles. And the schools scored themselves on the 11 principles and then identified 2 areas that they would like to improve. And I love Phil's last sentence, the schools formed vibrant professional communities. 4, use the 11 principles as your guide, and its corollary, develop an action plan with SMART goals, is really an outgrowth of tips number 2 and 3. And in this particular scene, we see the folks from a North Plainfield intermediate school giving the team from Jersey City Middle School, Frank Conwell, some good advice on forming a highly successful advisory with the middle school students. Tip number 5 is very important. Remember, it's all about them, not you. The aim of mentoring or coaching is not to create a school that is a clone of you. It is to uncover the strengths of the other school, start from there, and build them up. And in this particular scene, Gerard Stevenson, who is the principal of North Plainfield High School, actually interviewed the students from John Dwyer Technology Academy, its partner school, to find out, what were their needs. And it's interesting, John Dwyer this year, after being an honorable mention the previous year, again consulted North Plainfield High School, and with their help, now Dwyer is a New Jersey School of Character and a National School of Character. The 6th rule, make it fun, is a rule that could apply to practically every situation. The human connection is the most important. At this time of distance learning, probably if you are mentoring a school, there will be a great number of virtual meetings and Zoom meetings. But as you can see from the smile on this gal's face, she is very happy. No one could tell that she had traveled all the way from Philadelphia to a school in Elizabeth that morning, and she is the very essence of caring. By the way, food helps too.
In the Philadelphia project, it was really exciting as St. Cyril of Alexandria mentored St. Rose of Lima. Both schools were geographically close to one another. Both schools shared the same demographics, and both schools faced many of the same day-to-day challenges. And what I noticed more and more as the year went on was the relationship that was cultivated between the two schools. St. Cyril would get excited about their help for St. Rose, and St. Rose would get excited about the ideas and inspiration they were getting from St. Cyril. So it really went both ways, and the beautiful thing in all of this was that character, caring about students, creating a school culture where everyone mattered, where everyone was valued. All of this was put at the heart and soul of this project, and by the end of the year, you could just see a lasting and enduring relationship had taken place.
Everyone likes a great celebration or a final report card, so make certain that you plan a final activity to showcase your work. If you are a state coordinator and you are working with a cohort of schools, perhaps you might want to have a final showcase comparable to the one that we had. But if you're just an individual school working with another school, you still should have a final activity. It could be a presentation to the whole faculty or to the board. I didn't mention it before, but all larger mentorships should have an orientation at the beginning so that everyone begins to feel that you're part of a family. Of course, in this perilous time, it may not be possible to have an actual meeting, and it will have to be a virtual one.
I was recently reminiscing about the day in which Eileen came all the way down from New Jersey to Philadelphia in the very early morning hours for a meeting in which we were brainstorming and sharing ideas between the two schools, St. Cyril and St. Rose, and the meeting took place at St. Rose. We were in an old room that at the time needed a lot of repair work and maintenance. But as St. Rose listened to the team from St. Cyril, and as Eileen shared her experiences from schools in her New Jersey cohort, it was wonderful to see the optimism, the hope, and the passion that emerged as the meeting went on. By the end of the meeting, you could tell that St. Rose of Lima School was ready, enthusiastic, and totally on board with putting character at the heart of their school and making it the best possible character initiative that they could have, and one that would impact their students for years and years to come.
Like this young man, we are proud to announce our success. As a result of the Ascent Project, the following recognition has been made by Character.org. 4 National Schools of Character, 4 State Schools of Character, 2 honorable mentions, 8 promising practices, and hopefully many more awards to come. We have talked about actual achievements. Think about the potential ones. What would happen if all the Ascent mentee schools brought their districts on board? Look at these numbers.